Hello friends, my name is Marinés, and today we're going to talk about Bindery. I know that there is a good amount of speculation out there, and I also know that I can just let people be wrong on the internet, but I've never been very good at that. But in all seriousness and in all honesty, I want to recognize the fact that I am approaching this conversation with my own set of biases, right? I heard about Bindery and I was interested in what they were doing, and I have now chosen to participate. So I am very much approaching this conversation from that perspective. But this isn't me trying to convince you that it's good or trying to sell you on anything, but I did want to help answer questions, right? Because I see the questions out there and they do have answers. But more than that, I think that what Bindery is trying to address, and I think that a lot of the skepticism that people have are indicative of larger things about publishing and like larger publishing trends that I think are worth talking about. Before we jump into the questions that I have noted down, I'm going to talk about like how I found myself here, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about like the base model of how Bindery even works, and then I will jump into questions. So I've been creating content online for a like decent amount of time. Like I don't really know how far back we start counting because it goes way back, but for starting somewhere, we'll say that I had my personal blog in 2009 and I launched Snark Squad in 2011, and this YouTube channel is 9 years old, and I started creating TikToks around the time of the pandemic. So I've been through many iterations of creating content and across several different platforms, but I think at the basis of like my content has always been this idea of critical consumption of media. I really enjoy talking about what works or what doesn't work within an experience. I think it is so important to be able to break down and like criticize and consider our media. So I guess you could say that that is like the work that I have done across my content creation. And I say work, but for like the majority of time that I've been doing this, it has mostly been a hobby. More recently, there have been ways that I have been able to monetize it with things like AdSense or the TikTok Creator Fund, or the very few and far between sponsorships that I have done on either of those platforms. But I work full time. I have a regular job outside of this, so this is in no way sort of paying the rent. At some point within the last few years, I also launched a Patreon. So we fast forward from there to now and Bindery. I had several mutuals who launched with them, who were working with them immediately, people that I recognized from both here on YouTube and over on TikTok. So I was immediately like interested in what was going on here. And I will say that like when they first started talking about it, there was like almost a teasing out of information that just made me have like a lot of questions. I was in the same boat where I was like, okay, this sounds good, but I just have like a bunch of questions specifically for me about like the approach to publishing and what kind of books they wanted to publish and how they would be supporting influencers and how they would be supporting authors. So like there were a lot of things that I was curious to know. And I remember that when this was launching, we talked about it a lot in my Discord, and I was the first one there to be like, yeah, I've got a lot of questions. I feel like that maybe this could be interesting and it could work, but there are a lot of things that I personally would want answered. And as we were having this conversation, I was like, you know what, me being me, I went to the website and there was a section that was like interested, and I just submitted my email because I felt like I needed information, and the people with the information were the Bindery team. And they got back to me like pretty quickly, and the CEO of Bindery, Matt, sat down with me, and I brought my pink notebook full of questions. And I was like, well, how about this? And what about this? And with like patience and kindness, he answered all of my questions. It was very clear that they had a well thought out model and business plan. They have really excellent experience on their leadership team as well. People who have worked in publishing for years and years, people who have worked at Patreon. So just a really interesting mix of experience that very naturally fed into what they were trying to do at Bindery. So after we had that very great conversation, it was kind of like, well, do you wanna, or are we doing this? And I was like, yes. Okay, so at this point, I want to actually explain what Bindery is and what they're doing, because the Bindery model has two sort of related branches. The first piece of this really is just a membership service. It's a membership service like a Patreon. It's a membership service like YouTube has. It's a membership service like any other one that you have seen. It does have tiers. not a pyramid. It has tiers like any other Patreon or YouTube memberships or anything along those lines, where you contribute to a certain level and you unlock benefits or bonus content by contributing different amounts. That's exactly the Patreon model. Pledge to a creator to support their content to certain levels, and in exchange they give you access to bonus content. When I launched my Bindery, that's what it was. It was just the membership portion of this, and that membership portion is growing faster than the publishing portion of this. So there are many more influencers who are joining the membership platform, and I've had a lot of these people reach out to me and ask me about the pros and cons of using Bindery, right? Like, why would you go to Bindery versus Patreon? Like, what is the difference between the platforms? Why would you choose one over the other? And so, like with all things and all platforms, there are definitely pros and cons. So one of the biggest pros for me was that Bindery was a book specific platform. Like, you can go and check out all of their influencers who have signed up, and there are people who do much more than just talk about books, but the unifying theme amongst all of them is books. So it felt very like community oriented in that regard. I really liked a couple of the features that they had. One was that like my Bindery page could serve as sort of a homepage for my content. I make things on TikTok and I occasionally still make things here on YouTube as well, but I have audiences in both places. So I have people over on TikTok who never use YouTube and people on YouTube who never use TikTok. And so it always felt that like no matter where I was posting, like someone was missing something. But over on my Bindery page, I can cross post and embed all of that content into like a home page, which I think is a really neat way to organize myself and for people to keep in touch with what I am doing and what I'm making, regardless of the platform. And that is true for a free follow. You can just follow me for free over on my Bindery, and I do push out bonus content for my free followers as well. And then people who have the membership get an additional level of bonus content as well, but it all lives on my Bindery page. The second feature that I really enjoyed was the bookshelf, because honestly, I've spent so much time filling out descriptions of videos with like what books I mentioned and putting in affiliate links, but the bookshelf does that organization for you. So whatever I post on my Bindery, I can tag the books that I talked about in that video, and it all gets added to my bookshelf. And so you can look at my bookshelf and see the books that I've been talking about recently. If you click on a book, it will take you to the videos where I talk about that book, and if I've convinced you to read it, you can click my affiliate link and then also support me by buying the book that way. So I just thought that that was a really neat organizational tool. I think the thing to consider as a main con is that Bindery still is being developed, and that includes the platform. The platform is still going through iterations and it's still in its infancy, so to speak. It is fully functional and I get everything that I need out of it, but there's still a lot of ways that it's like developing. If you go to something like Patreon, that's like a fully built out product. Now I will say, and I mean this with 100% honesty, and this is not the case for everyone, which is why I think that this is like important decision-making information, that this is a product in development, is that I really enjoy this piece of it. And I swear to you, like, it's just something about who I am. I am super energized by like new projects. I love being in on the ground floor of things. I love starting things. I've worked in startups, like in my actual career. My career has been in working in startups and helping startups get up and running. Like, this is truly something that I enjoy. And so this idea of like helping them build the product by being like some of the first users, and the way that they are very open to feedback, the way that like the level of support that is feels very one-on-one, like I personally really enjoy that stuff, but it isn't for everybody. Some people want something that is well established. So like I said, I think that that is important to consider. For me personally, like being here at the ground floor was attractive, but I know that it maybe won't be for everyone. So that's the membership portion of it, and it exists exactly like a Patreon does, and there's nothing else here additional, nothing else shady. There's absolutely no recruitment. There's no I recruit you and you have to recruit 10 people, which is like the multi-levels that is needed to make something multi-level marketing. Words mean things. There are no sales, there are no commissions, there's no products that any of my members are selling, because that's just simply not the model. It is a membership platform, just like anybody you know who has a Patreon. Now, if a community gains momentum, if there's good engagement, if the creator is consistent in creating content, then that creator has the potential to convert their membership over into the publishing side of this and to launch an imprint. Again, that's what happened with me. I started my membership community, and thank you so much to everybody who supported me over on Bindery. We were able to very quickly launch my imprint, Mareas. And I think that this is a place where people have a lot of additional questions about how this all works. So the first question that I got is, where do you think Bindery is succeeding where other trad pubs are failing? I think the thing that intrigued me about this model is this idea of pairing a reviewer or an influencer or somebody who knows like the community space, the review space, the marketing piece of it with an author. I was at AWP this year, which is a conference that is specifically focused on writing and publishing, and I was lucky enough to be able to speak on a panel, and it was a panel specifically about the intersection of influencing and like media critique and criticism. And it was very interesting because most of the questions that we got from the audience, and specifically from the authors in the audience, were about how authors can work with influencers. It was also very interesting to hear, like I sat in a panel specifically where the topic came up around like whether or not it was worth it to go out and like get freelance PR support as an author, if that was something that was needed. And it was so interesting to hear like a panel of traditionally published authors say that yes, that like for the most part would be worth it, because even if like on the chance that your publishing house gave you some marketing and some PR support, it would not be enough to like make you successful. And so that investing in freelance PR was like a pretty good move. If you had the means to invest, that would be a good place to do it. And that is so interesting because my understanding of like, you know, the reason that you would go the traditional publishing route and like the appeal of the traditional publishing route, it is multifaceted, right? They're taking a lot of the financial risk on your behalf. They are helping you edit and package and distribute the book. And all of that is still very true in traditional publishing. But there was also this understanding that they would market the book for you, right? And I think that more and more what we are seeing is that there's this expectation that the authors themselves take more of the marketing on their own plate. And like there's this unspoken, or maybe like not so unspoken thing, that it is very helpful if the author is also online, if the author is also cultivating their own community, if the author is basically behaving as like an influencer themselves. And so you see this like additional burden being placed on the author where they're being taken away from like the thing that they are good at and maybe the thing that they mostly want to do, which is like writing their stories, and they have this additional responsibility or burden of navigating these spaces. And we see what happens, like how tricky it can be for authors to navigate reader spaces. And this is not me saying that authors don't belong in reading communities and that there isn't a place to share space for authors and writers and readers, but that it is hard to navigate that line, especially when you are existing as an author in spaces where reviewing is also happening. I've also just honestly been thinking a lot about this, about the way that the publishing landscape has changed and continues to change. I think a lot about the impact that 2020 had on the landscape, particularly because we had that like exodus of people in editorial, but then a jump in sales because of the pandemic. And like the lesson that publishing functionally took away is that you can make more profit with less editorial. And I personally, and very anecdotally, I feel like I have seen that reflected in the quality of books that has been coming out over the last several years. And we also know that like that exodus from publishing for various reasons and sort of across the board affects many other aspects of publishing. I think a lot about like what it means for books of business in an industry where like connections mean everything. I talked about this most recently when we were talking about TikTok and the fast fashion of publishing, and just like really thinking about like the quality of things that we are getting and the distribution of dollars on behalf of publishers. And so all of that I think is what Bindery is addressing, and I think it's doing so in a very interesting way, right? We have a lot of people within publishing asking, how do we tap into influencer marketing? What's the secret to having somebody hold up your book and have that book go viral? How do you get somebody like who is passionate about organically promoting your book? And really that is like the secret sauce, right? The way that you have these like big listicless moments is that it comes truly from like love and passion. So you have that question of like, how do we tap into influencer marketing? And then additionally, then how do we compensate these influencers for that work? Because like, regardless of how you feel about influencers in general or reviewers in general, like the truth of the matter is that reviewers are moving books. There are books to be sold here. So how do we get like these reviewers compensated for that work, and how do we take some of the burden of marketing back off of authors? And so this is Bindery's solution in terms of pairing an influencer with an author, specifically by empowering the influencer to launch their imprint and to bring them in early in the process and let them identify the book that they fell in love with, to see it through the entire publishing process, and to then be a champion for this book and to be able to say to their audience, I fell in love with this book and I think that you'll love it too. There are like a bunch of problems in traditional publishing. And I don't think that Bindery solves all of them or is trying to solve all of them. But I think that this specific way that it is thinking about marketing and reading communities is what intrigued me. And honestly, that feels like revolutionary within the publishing industry. That still feels like it's catching up to what even like influencer marketing is, or how reading communities exist and operate. And they're doing so in a lot of times very begrudgingly. Like there is a sort of resentment that reading communities are forming and selling to each other and moving books. And so like the fact that Bindery tapped into that and said, no, there's potential here. Like how can we use it to the benefit of both the influencer and the author? Like that's the thing that I think that they are doing well. That was a very long answer. I feel like I had a lot to say about that. But my second question is, how much of the revenue model depends on the books being successful versus the subscription? So let's talk about money things. So if you're just hosting your membership on the Bindery platform, of the membership revenue that you collect, you keep 75% and 25% goes to Bindery. Plus you keep 100% of everything that you earn through your affiliate links. Now, when a community is converted over to an imprint, that split becomes 50-50. So I keep 50% of everything that I earn through my membership revenue, and 50% of it then goes, for all intents and purposes, into running my imprint. But then you also have the opportunity to earn a portion of the royalties of all of the books sold through your imprint. So because of that, the more books are sold, the better for everybody on the publishing side. The more books sold, the better for the publisher, the better for the imprint, the better for the author. But it isn't like I'm earning $0 unless the book sells particularly well. I'm still earning revenue through my membership subscription. Obviously, there's also an investment of time and energy here on the front end. But for me personally, it felt like a wash in terms of investment of time and energy, because I would be making bonus content anyway, like whether it was for Patreon or for Bindery. And in fact, a lot of the work that I'm doing on the front end as an imprint, right, investing time into reading manuscripts and sitting in meetings and things like that, it becomes bonus content, because the whole project is that I get to bring my community along with me on this publishing journey, right? So I'm documenting all of this, and so the work doubles as bonus content, and that bonus content is a time investment that I would be making anyways. I also want to be like 1,000% clear here that like I have not invested any of my own money into this process at all. Like Bindery does not ask for any money like upfront or any sort of investment. There's absolutely no give us $1,000 and you get your welcome box or like anything along those lines. I am not out any money. I am making money through my membership service by providing bonus content. Obviously, when I have books printed, the better those books sell, the better for everybody on the publishing end. I do want to talk about the royalties, because one of the questions I have noted down is about the royalty structure and whether or not it's fair for influencers to be taking a portion of the royalties from the author, right? If this is the person that wrote the book, then why me, who's just saying buy this book? Like, why would I get a portion of the royalties? And then also about the author advances and why they are so small. There's also like a very detailed FAQ on Bindery's website that has like all of this spelled out. They even show you the math on a lot of these things with like examples, because it can get very tricky sort of trying to compare across like different models from publisher to publisher. But their entire model is like very transparent, and it's available on the website for everybody to see how they work, but I'm going to try and break it down as best I can. So we'll start with the advance. So basically what an advance is the publisher saying, we're going to front you this money, right? And we're going to sort of like take this bet that your book will sell enough to eventually like earn this amount of money. So we're going to give you that money up front. And when an author receives an advance, they then have to earn out that advance through sales. If they never earn out that advance, then they never start earning royalties on that book. You have to earn out your advance before you start earning royalties on your book. I feel like people are most often hearing about like the unicorn deals in publishing, right? Like the debut author multi-book series got acquired for 6 figures. Like those are the things that we're often hearing about that make sort of like the publishing news. But again, those are unicorn deals. When I was looking up information about just like averages for advances, I found anywhere from like $5,000 to $50,000 as an average, and for debut authors from $5,000 to $15,000 as an average. So a $10,000 advance is comfortably within the range of like an average advance within the publishing industry. Different authors will want or prefer or hope for or wish for different things. There might be an author who's holding out for a larger advance because they need it or they want it in order to keep working, in order to support themselves while they work. But I remember that when we were talking about publishing paid me, that N.K. Jemisin specifically was talking about how she always negotiated her agreements for a lower advance so that she could earn out faster and get into royalties quicker. Now for the royalties, when you see information about averages for royalties, you're usually seeing royalties as a percentage of the list price of the book. Bindery's model is actually based on net royalty. With a traditional royalty that's based on list price, the author is essentially making the same amount on every sale, no matter where that book is sold. With Bindery's model, which is based on net royalty, that means that the author has the opportunity to earn more depending on where the book is sold. So if you buy it directly from the imprint where there's no wholesale discount, then the author has the opportunity to earn more on those sales. And so the author is benefiting from these more lucrative sales channel right along with the publisher. Across the board, however, if we're just sort of looking at averages, the royalty structure on Bindery gives the author the opportunity to earn about 2 times the royalties than they would on a traditional publishing model. And so the model itself is a smaller, but still within the average advance for the opportunity to earn out quicker into a royalty structure that is very generous. Now, the influencer, the imprint, does also earn royalties. That portion of the royalties comes from like the publisher portion of the royalties. Even in traditional publishing, the publisher and the imprint earn royalties. So that's what's happening here as well. I'm not taking a portion of the author's royalties. There's an author portion, which is 50% of net royalties. And then the other 50%, Bindery shares it, 25% for Bindery, 25% for the imprint. I also saw a few questions that were like, what makes the influencer qualified to do any of this work, right? What makes you qualified to run an imprint, to pick a book to publish or anything along those lines? But like, that's the whole thing, right? Like that's the whole model that Bindery is saying, is that like we have formed communities in which you have your trusted reviewers, right? People that you know that you can turn to, and if they like a thing that you probably will. And so that is like what qualifies them to recommend something to you. And we're just letting them do that like sooner in the process. And to be very clear, again, the role of the influencer here is to identify the book that they want to champion and then to bring along their community through the publishing process. But like, I am not making any of the decisions here, right? Like I'm not cover designing. I'm not the creative director here. I'm not editing the book. There's a team of paid professionals that are in charge of taking this manuscript and making it a published book. And I am like sitting in on these meetings. I'm able to give my opinions and I am bringing my community along for the ride as well. As an example, I did get to sit in on the first meeting about the cover design for my first acquisition, which is called The Unmapping, right? And like the creative director came with a bunch of ideas and the author is obviously very heavily consulted. They ultimately have like the last word on all of the editorial decisions, but they asked me, what did the book make you feel? And what did you picture when you saw the book? And like, this font or this font. And so that's really neat to be able to be included in on the process. But also, again, there is a team of professionals that are like making the decisions alongside the author. I think the really lovely thing about Bindery is that every influencer or every tastemaker, as Bindery calls it, is approaching this in their own unique way. I was recently at BookNet Fest and Jason and Meg were both there, and they both have imprints with Bindery. And so we got a chance to catch up with each other about how this experience has been with all of us. And we were laughing because we each like approached our acquisitions like differently. Meg very specifically knows that she wants a diverse, cozy fantasy. Jason has like a little bit of a wider scope, but he knows pretty well what he's looking for. I had like very little idea what I wanted. Like, I mean, not that I didn't have, I know what I wanted. There were certain qualities and characteristics that I was on the lookout for, but it wasn't very tied to genre or a specific kind of story, right? Like I want something that is nicely written. I want something that is thematically resonant. I wanted something that felt like a genre blend. So there were like specific characteristics that I was looking for, but in order to identify them, like I read the first 25 pages of every manuscript that came across my desk. And so when I told them that, they were like, girl, And I was like, I know, but I needed that in order to help me sort of refine what I was looking for and help me identify what I was looking for. And so every imprint has its own flavor. Every imprint has its own approach. And I think that's going to make for a really interesting selection under the Bindery umbrella. Somebody asked me if from a creator standpoint, I feel pressured to create special content for my Bindery. Yes. The answer is yes, but like internal pressure, a lot of internal pressure. We have a lot of like methods to like support each other within the Bindery community, and we're always bouncing ideas off of each other. And there's a lot of like knowledge sharing in terms of like how best to approach like the community and the content creation. But I feel like a lot of internal pressure just from the perspective of like, I don't know, people are supporting me with the idea of like getting this bonus content. And I feel like a very healthy amount of responsibility for my audience. And this isn't like exclusive to Bindery. I have always felt this way. And I feel this way about my reviews. And I feel this way about the quality of my content. And I feel this way about if I ever do a sponsorship, like I want it to fit in line with who I am as a person and with my voice. And I want to like always keep my audience in mind. And so just generally, I feel a lot of responsibility to my audience, and that is true through my membership community. And so like, yes, I feel like the pressure of making sure that this is like worth their while and like a healthy and happy community for them to join. So there is that sort of pressure. But like I mentioned earlier, there is like that nice way that like the bonus content is built into just doing the publishing thing. I'm about to start reading manuscripts for my second acquisition, and I'm just so excited. So it's like fun. This work is fun for me. Like I'm having a blast doing it, but I do also feel like, I don't know, a healthy amount of making sure that I'm doing this well. That ties into another question I got about what my favorite thing about collaborating with Bindery is. And it definitely is like the community aspect of it, both for Mareas, my community there, and the way that like working with everybody else who is doing Bindery and all of the other influencers, all of the other imprints in the Bindery team, like how much fun that has been and how incredibly supportive everybody is of each other. This has been a lot of fun. And it is so freaking cool that I like got to read a manuscript and say, wow, I love that one. And like, it's going to be a book that other people can hold in their hands. Like that is just like the freaking coolest thing. And I have been doing this for a very long time, as I mentioned, I think a time or two. But I've also like worked as a freelance editor and a freelance sensitivity reader. So I've had like bits and pieces, right? I've worked with publishers and I've done events and I've sat on panels, but this is a different portion of the publishing industry that I'm getting to see. And so seeing like the inner workings of it all has been also super, super interesting. The next question is about why all 4 books, the freshman class of books that are coming out in October, are coming out in the same day. I know that there is like a healthy amount of wait and see with Bindery, as it kind of is with like every new business venture, right? Like an amount of like, well, it has to prove the concept and then it has to prove sustainable. But I think a really good indication that things are going well so far is that there are 4 real books that are coming out in October. So these are the first 4 books being released by Bindery. The first is from the Violet Tear imprint, and it's Inferno's Heir by Tiffany Wong. The second is from Inky Phoenix, and it is Strange Beasts by Susan J. Morris. Third is from Easy Cat Press, and it is House of Frank by Kay Sinclair. And the fourth is from Fantasy and Friends, and it's And the Sky Bled by S. Hattie. So typically you wouldn't see something like this where like 4 books would be coming out at the same time, because you probably don't want to compete with your own books in that way. But because this is like the freshman class of books, because they were all like going through the process at the same time, and because it's like a marketing thing, all of these are coming out at the same time. That probably will not be the case for any books moving forward. Like each book is now going through the process at its own pace. And so the Unmapping, for instance, my first acquisition is coming June 2025. So it's just it's just like a little marketing thing. It's honestly not that big a deal. And that's it. Those are all of the questions that were submitted to me or that I saw floating around out there, but I'm sure that there are more. So if you have any other questions for me about Bindery, about Mareas, about my own journey, I'd be super happy to answer them. Like I said, I've had a really positive experience with this so far, and I definitely would not be involving my audience unless I felt like fully aligned with what I was doing and I felt confident in what I've seen so far from Bindery. And I know I've said this like multiple times, that truly this has been like such a delight for me to do. I love books and I love storytelling so much. So to get to be able to participate in this process has been a dream come true. And I'm so excited for you guys to be able to read The Unmapping by Denise S. Robbins. The Unmapping is a story of two emergency workers on the eve of a hurricane that is set to hit New York City. But what they don't know is that they are also experiencing another geographic natural disaster, an unexplained phenomenon where buildings and roads and places are all shifting in the night, so that you wake up and you are no longer where you were when you fell asleep. So this is a story of two characters who are trying to navigate that chaos, who are trying to navigate what happens when you become lost within your own home, that are navigating both the larger disasters that they are experiencing, but also the personal problems that come along with those disasters. It is a story that is told in almost like shifting vignettes. We get these interjections from different points of view and characters, so it really builds out this sense of like what everybody is going through. And it is a story that has this like very large set piece of a natural disaster, but is firmly rooted in like character and character exploration. Depending on when you're watching this, if you're watching it as it just comes out, I'm actually going to be doing a live show with the author Denise S. Robbins this upcoming Saturday. The live show is already scheduled, so you can ask it to remind you, and we'll be talking to her about media influences, about the books that she loves, about what inspired her to write The Unmapping, and just all things about reading and writing and her journey to publishing. So I hope that you guys join us. And that's it. Thank you guys so much for allowing me the time and space to answer a bunch of these questions. And like I said, let me know if you have any more. The link to my bindery will be in the description. You can give me a free follow, or if you feel so inclined to support my work, you can do so as well. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon.